Hey everybody, it's Jason Onsbach. Welcome to episode 3 of the Galaxy's Edge subscriber exclusive podcast. You ever have that dream where you're back in college or back in high school and you have to take a test and you realize you're completely unprepared and your entire future and life depends on your success, but you didn't study, you don't know what you're doing. And then you find out that you have no pants. That's a little bit like today's show, because here I am ready for a two-parter, ready for my partner and I to talk about some really cool stuff. And Nick Cole, he's missing in action. So it's just me, and I'm gonna have to do my best to impersonate an on-air radio personality. So let's give this a try. And why don't we start out by talking a bit about Legionnaire. Legionnaire is something that I can talk about directly. I really would like Nick to be in on the conversation for the Savage Wars, and then also when we answer some questions that have been posed throughout the week. But Legionnaire, I feel qualified to talk about Legionnaire. So if you haven't read it already, Legionnaire is a book that's set about a decade or so before Galaxy's Edge Galactic Outlaws. And the concept behind this book is that stormtroopers are cool, and Legionnaires are cool. So a book that features Legionnaires would likewise be, I don't know, really cool. And so we had this idea, and Nick said, go for it. If you don't know, Nick is working on about, 70 novels right now, plus writing a video game, plus angering various people on all ends of the political spectrum. So he's busy. But he said, go for it. You go ahead and write this one. So I started jotting down some ideas, and that opening line of "the galaxy is a dumpster fire" sort of came up, and we built on it. So what Legionnaire is it's a standalone story that might expand beyond it, that focuses on a troop of Legionnaires in Victory Company. And these guys are, at this point, maybe the last of the Legionnaires that haven't been sort of infiltrated to a crippling degree by appointees from the Republic Senate or House of Reason. If you remember in chapter 2 and 3 of Galaxy's Edge Galactic Outlaws, the Legionnaires kind of get undone by a poorly qualified appointed soldier who doesn't do his job. And well, that's great for Captain Keel and Ravi. It's not so good for the Legionnaires. Well, that kind of dynamic is just sort of really starting to take off in the Legionnaire novel. And so we get to follow that a little bit. It's a source of tension. But mainly, we're following what is in Galaxy's Edge the equivalent of Army Rangers, Delta Force, Navy SEALs, elite fighting units who are on a planet that they find out is a lot more hostile than they realized, under the influence of where we kind of have the rebellion birthing, which is the mid-core worlds, those worlds that are kind of in the middle of the galaxy. So they're trying to establish relationships with the aliens on this planet, trying to improve relationships, trying to make sure that a Republican chosen senator is installed and supported by the tribal chiefs, and they just run into it. And you'll be able to read more about that in the next chapter. But it's a book I'm really excited about, having a blast writing it. Although we're just going to release 1 or 2 chapters of it a month, I think it's going to be done well before we actually before we can actually release it chapter by chapter. In fact, I'm thinking this might be done by the end of the first quarter 2017, which would be March. So that leaves us with some decisions. I think what we'll probably do with that in that case is still release it chapter by chapter for our subscribers. So if you're a subscriber, you're going to get the story for free no matter what. And then our special access and our partner subscribers who get digital copies of the complete books as part of their subscription package. What we'll do for you guys is, once it's done, we'll just give you the ebook copy, and we'll give you the print copy if you're at that level, the signed print copy. And then with that, we'll still send out the weekly installments or the bi-monthly installments chapter by chapter, but you'll be able to sort of enjoy it and read it early. and hopefully you'll like what's coming from it. But like I said, it's a lot of fun to write. I'm just about a third of the way done right now, and I just started it on January 1st, so good progress for the writing of that particular book, and really looking forward to hearing what you guys all think about it. So Legionnaire is the first of what I think is many side projects, something that can kind of talk about a little bit, but we've been going and working, and we've gotten some contact from people who are interested in writing in the world, and we'll talk about that more a little bit later. But we actually have content for you, some short stories and some other things that's just waiting to go out. But what Nick and I want to do is we want to get more of the main story arc done and complete, so that you're able to get a good feel for the universe itself. And then once that's done, we're going to start releasing some additional product. We're going to start releasing some short stories and some other things that are set up by some talented writers, and hopefully you'll enjoy what you find there. So that's Legionnaire in a nutshell. And again, just let me know what you're thinking on Legionnaire. I'd really like to hear if you like it, if you hate it, what you'd like to see more of, what you'd like to see less of. So on our subscribers only page, we were asked the question a while back about space battles. People are wanting to see some good old-fashioned space combat. And the analogy of the old Star Wars Rogue Squadron books was brought up. I don't know if you guys read Rogue Squadron. I read all of those books, and I enjoyed them thoroughly. I also really enjoyed the Dark Horse Rogue Squadron comics. Those were a lot of fun to read. In fact, one of my favorite sort of expanded universe Star Wars ideas came out of those Rogue Squadron comics. The Rogue Squadron was on a planet, I forget which one, and this was after the rebellion had blown up the second Death Star, and they were kind of on the ascent, and the Empire was on the decline. And they ended up on a planet where there was sort of a university with pro-imperial sentiments, and it introduced the concept that the Alliance narrative of Alderaan being destroyed by the first Death Star was just propaganda, and that Alderaan was destroyed by some kind of natural occurrence. The sun went supernova, there was a cataclysmic geographic event, and that's how it was destroyed, not that the Empire did it. And they kind of had the whole, it's impossible for a battle station to destroy a planet. You just said that to kind of spread terror and gain sympathy. There's no way the Empire could have destroyed a whole planet. And even if they had the power to do it, they wouldn't have done it. I just thought that was a really fun spin on the propaganda that would have no doubt come from the Alliance blowing up the Death Star, and then the Empire sort of having to backpedal. Because what do you say if you're an Imperial propaganda minister, right? Had the Death Star not been destroyed, of course you're going to wheel it out there and show your power and show how untouchable the Empire is. But the moment that thing gets blown up, it's like all bets are off. Everything changes, right? Because you're saying, well, we have this super, super powerful weapon, but a band of rebels who we've been telling you all this time are insignificant and no threat blew it up. No, probably deny would have been the course of action. Just what Death Star? I don't know what you're talking about. The rebels did blow up a peaceful space station and caused a lot of damage and murdered a lot of innocents. That's definitely how you'd spin it if you're an Imperial propaganda minister. So yeah, it makes sense that that narrative would have gone out there, and there would have been some people loyal to the Empire who would have heard what the rebellion was saying and sort of held that against them to say, you know, that was a tragedy what happened on Alderaan, and here you are trying to turn it into a political coup, trying to turn it into something that's going to allow you to score points. But we know better. That can't happen. So that was one of my favorite parts about Rogue Squadron. But to get back to the question, yes, we do have some space battles set up. In fact, the chapter that you'll get this week jumps back to Captain Keel and Ravi. And it's going to kind of be the conclusion of that part, and then they're up in the sky after that. So we should see them before too long out there in space, and I'm not sure if Nick ever read Rogue Squadron, but if you've read Control Alt Revolt, you know he's definitely got a thing for space combat, right? Because his was a little bit more Star Trekky.
You there?
Hey, Nick, welcome. Glad you joined us.
It's me, Nick Cole. I'm sorry, I was in a meeting.
Was it one of your video game meetings?
It really was, and we were actually talking about some very cool and exciting things in the future of this secret project that I'm working on. And now I'm dashing out to my studio so I can talk with the kids.
Yeah, all the cool cats are here. Well, let me catch you up to speed. I took advantage of the opportunity to just sort of explain the thinking behind Legionnaire, and so we talked about that. And then we were answering. I was in the middle of answering the question about, are we going to see some space battles? And so I reminisced a bit on some of the old Star Wars Rogue Squadron books, which were very space combat oriented. And I was just saying that you're a fan of space battles. And if anyone read Control Alt Revolt, there were some really fantastic space battles, even though they were more of the Star Trek variety.
I know, exactly. It's blasphemous. But I really am. I think the hard part about writing space battles is, they are so visual and everything like that. And sometimes in the science fiction that you read, that's really great science fiction, especially if it was written by like hard SF authors, it has a tendency to come off as very underwhelming. And what I always loved about Star Wars, especially Han Solo flying, was, and I'm a pilot in real life too, also.
Are you really? Do you have a license?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
I
so
totally
cool.
am.
I didn't know that.
Is that I always felt that that Harrison Ford, who also was a pilot, captured what it was like to fly a spacecraft. That it was very, hands-on. You just had the right look for it. And it wasn't just, like sometimes you'll watch really bad science fiction and, everybody's not moving and it's very, serene. And so combined with, Lucas really, we can say nice things about George Lucas in Empire and stuff like that. I think they visually made the best space combat, space flight sequences of the dogfight World War II variety.
Yes.
I think that Star Trek is much more the grand sort of pirate ship battle. So that's really hard to convey in writing. And I think we are both trying to attack it from that angle.
Yeah, I agree. And it makes sense. I mean, Star Wars had it to a lesser extent in that the capital ships were massed around the second Death Star and they were firing. But, it was more of just for show while the starfighters were darting back and forth. But, that's something that people will always sort of bring up is, well, why not have your starfighters on, a slave system and avoid the loss of human life or alien life? There's just something about just keeping people in the cockpits, though, that I think is compelling, even if logically maybe a drone can do the job just as well. What do you think?
Well, I think Lucas addresses that. Actually, it's one of the things he does well in the first three movies, as in 1, 2, and 3, not 4, 5, and 6. As a society, we've got to collectively have a better way to say that than always having to go in and preface for not the first movies, 1, 2, and 3, not 4, 5, and 6. So if anybody can think of a better, if we just say the prequels, and the prequels, Lucas addresses that in that the drone army is susceptible to being hacked. So that's always the thing that you don't, and there's no independent thought, which is a looser point and could be overcome. But at the same time, it's like the old military saying, you don't own something unless you put boots on the ground. So you got to have a human interaction. Now, I actually was thinking about the grand scale battles of starships in Star Wars, and an interesting conclusion that I came to is the limited ability of actual major weapons, because you get the Death Star with its really big laser beam. Let's just call it a big laser beam.
Super laser.
What is it actually? What kind of weapon is it?
Well, it's technically a super laser powered by kyber crystals.
Okay, so it's just a big laser.
Huge freaking laser.
Right. It's a HFL. So um, none of the capital ships have big lasers.
Not that big.
Right. So here's the deal that maybe no one's ever really thought about the Star Wars universe. It is a carrier universe.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have destroyers and battleships and cruisers. Every ship is actually a carrier, because
Right.
at the end of the day, lasers can only be so big, and the best strategy or tactic that you have is to have a whole bunch of lasers for cheap, coming at you
Mm-hmm.
from every possible angle. You know, so
Right.
one of the things that I like about Star Wars, as opposed to what real space combat would be like, which is why hard SF people are such killjoys, is that, like, you know, anything moving at relativistic speeds in space, suffering any kind of damage whatsoever, would rip itself to shreds. But
Mm-hmm.
instead, you have these really big capital ships just sitting around, throwing heated light energy at each other, and it only does so much damage. It doesn't do enough damage to actually destroy the ship, but in a constant amount, um, you know, in a voluminous amount, it actually does stuff. Now, in reality, that's how life really is. Most people, ever since Desert Storm in 1991 and atom bombs and modern Hollywood TV movie thinking, have come to believe that, you know, your most powerful weapons can immediately solve all your problems. There are these super smart weapons that can immediately destroy everything, blah, blah, blah. Okay, for fighting like medieval nations, like most of the Arab world, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But for actually fighting, say, you know, what the kind of war that I was in, which was the Cold War, for fighting, you know, overwhelming and superior numbers with an equal amount of technology inside the Fulda Gap in Germany, it's actually, there's no one weapon system that's going to win the whole game. It's actually the concept of mass, where you bring
Mm-hmm.
a bunch of smaller weapons together and you make them work to defeat the enemy. And that's really actually what Star Wars captures brilliantly. And then because Lucas and Spielberg by default were both really influenced by World War II, they really do make carriers the central focus of their starships, because
Right.
carriers basically won the Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so it's interesting, but Star Wars is very much a World War II battle.
Mm-hmm. No, it is, and that's the question that I guess maybe our readers might be asking is, what's the influence going to be? So I was talking about, I don't even know if I mentioned it, but certainly you've mentioned it in talking about it on some other interviews. Legionnaire definitely has that sort of generation kill, 2003, 2004. 2001, Afghanistan versus the Taliban type feel, and it was kind of designed to be that way. But I would say that we're probably more influenced. I mean, World War II is an influence, but I would say that you need to kick in Vietnam and the Gulf Wars to kind of capture our combat feelings. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely, the arc that I see that we're in right now with this universe, we're definitely with the Legionnaires who work for the Republic.
Hmm.
We're definitely in the sort of aliens mentality, which is small, highly trained units surrounded by overwhelming numbers.
Hmm.
Because the Republic is basically just barely holding on to control of the galaxy, the known galaxy, which is pretty much the whole galaxy.
Hmm.
What we're going to hope to move into by the end of the Legionnaires book, and by the few books that are going to come out after our initial story that we're telling in serialization, is, I think, a much bigger conflict between what would be the new empire
Hmm.
and the Republic, sort of fighting some really super big scale battles for control of the galaxy. I would say that's what we're moving into. So I definitely vote, you know, and you and I probably haven't talked about it much, but I definitely vote moving back into that World War II mentality,
Yeah,
which I
yeah,
think will
no,
be
I love
easy.
it.
Yeah, I think it'll be easy for you because you're such a fan of old movies.
Hmm.
So I think we can. And I think people are ready for that. You know, like, it was interesting. I was just listening to, or I was actually just reading another author who's pretty well respected in science fiction. He's a bit of a history buff. His name is S.M. Sterling, and him and I were up for the Dragon together, and I came to know him through that. And he made this point. He said, it's a modern myth that young men go off to war and come back horribly scarred. For most of history, and many people could say rightfully that's a myth perpetrated by libs to sort of control society and show that war is bad and all these kind of things. But he was saying, if you even go back to Teddy Roosevelt, he went off to war. He thought it was the greatest thing ever. It was totally great for his career. And his only regret was that he couldn't go back to war. So for which is the opposite of Andrew Jackson, or kind of similar, because Andrew Jackson's only regret, believe it or not, seriously, was that he didn't shoot his vice president during his presidential term. So
sounds like Andrew Jackson.
Yeah. So, but there are all these. Much of human history is made up of people sort of honorably engaging and being motivated by, and here's going to be a really brutal word, but enjoying war. And people can try to amputate that out of us now and say, oh, blah, 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 that's bad, you're misogynistic, patriarchic, homophobic, blah, blah, blah. But why inherently, if you leave two little boys alone in a room, will they pick up sticks and start imagining war, or throwing dirt clods? It's something hardwired into our little goblin brains that's what we do. And we actually do it quite well. So I've always thought about that in like the big science fiction thing, that what is the human contribution to the Star Wars galaxy? And the human, because there are all these races, there's the fish people, squid people, everybody, but the primary majority of stormtroopers and rebel legionnaires and everything like that are humans. And the argument, and the argument can be made that no one does war like humans. And
No, I agree. Like Wookiees are plenty strong, but humans are the warriors.
Yeah, but they're not even. I mean, maybe they're really designed for war. But that's the universe. Let's use that as the galaxy. And you could say there's really nothing special in these humans that makes them above average, better than other people at war. But for some reason, they're the best warriors. And it's really understated. Yes, the Wookiees could rip your arms off and all these kind of things. And the Ewoks kind of get together and outsmart all these light armored vehicles. But for some reason, the humans are occupying the majority of the combat positions. They're the main bulk of the troops. So why is that? Like, what is the Star Wars explanation for, if there are all these alien races, why are 99% of them humans fighting?
Right. So I think that is a really good segue into the Savage Wars. I think it's a really good segue into the Savage Wars.
Sure.
Unless you want to answer one reader question here, because Savage Wars could be a long conversation.
I do. I want to answer it.
Okay. So Bill.
I do.
Bill Kravitz.
I know and love Bill.
Yeah, right. He's a subscriber. He's a active participant over on our Facebook subscribers only page. Well, he asked the question. He said, do you plan to open up the Galactic Outlaws universe to other writers similar to the expanded universe of Star Wars?
We absolutely do. I'll speak for both of us, but I'm sure you'd say the same thing that I would say. Yeah, we absolutely do. We've already gotten other writers who want to be involved in it. We're already grooming one particular fellow who actually has completed a story. The question I would put out to you fans right now is, do you want to finish the Galaxy's Edge Galactic Outlaws serial and then have access to that fully complete, I think it's about 12,000 words short story, and it's non sequitur, it's just about the universe, has nothing to do so far with the overall plot, or do you want to wait for the end of Galactic Outlaws? Is that a fair thing to put out there?
Yeah, I think that's a really fair thing to put out there.
Sure.
And we actually were just interviewed on the Legendarium, Preston Lay's podcast, and we talked quite a bit about Galaxy's Edge. I don't think that one's aired yet. So what people don't know, but what we've already discussed, is we kind of figure between June and August is when book one will be finished and
Right.
available in its completion. So, if you're thinking, well, does this mean I have to wait 2 years? No, not at all. We just want to overload you with good stuff. We really want you to feel like your subscription is worth it. Like, that's really important to us. So it's going to be done.
Okay. So it's weird. In this video game meeting that I was just in, the lead designer and I, who is probably the best game designer in the world right now, we're just talking about that because he worked for the greatest game company in the world. And he said that that was their philosophy, that there was a dark side mode where you could just hit people for microtransactions and blow them out. We called that gangster mode, where you could just basically funnel people into a store of buying your stuff. He said, but if you look at this video game company, I can't say their name.
Oh, sure.
But they're the best. And he said, they always chose what's called the long con, which is to give you lots of value in hopes that you will be loyal for life, stay in it, that you'll always feel like, wow, I'm getting so much from these people. They give so much. I really actually feel that I'm getting the better end of the deal with them. And so it's weird. We were just talking about that. And so now here I am putting that into practice, and you are too. So yeah, I mean, and that company is very successful. So I think we have a good business model. We're going to give you lots of value, and because that's just the right thing to do in this day and age of people trying to rip everybody off.
No, I agree. Yeah, it just support me because, and maybe you'll get something. Yeah, I agree. That's unfortunately where it seems like things are going. But no, we want you to definitely feel like you're getting your money's worth and more. So then Savage Wars, we asked a question. So our partner subscribers have the ability to weigh in and say, this is how I think the universe should be built, or this is what I think the backstory to the universe should be. And we asked a question about the Savage Wars. It's something that's come up a few times in the book, just sort of put towards, just sort of like hinted at. But there's a big backstory. We're going to talk about it in a second. But we wanted to know when they felt the Savage Wars should end. So we asked them if the events of Galactic Outlaws is essentially modern day, how long ago should the Savage Wars have ended? And we gave them some options. It should be the same as the Vietnam War is today, or the Civil War, or the Revolutionary War, the French Indian War, or let's go way back to the Peloponnesian War, and World War II, World War I. And the winner, Nick, was Vietnam. The Savage Wars should have ended about the same distance of time as we are removed from Vietnam. So that's what we're going to run with, right?
Right. Yeah, I agree.
So then the question is, and it's weird to me that our Vietnam veterans are getting older, because, I'll meet people that served in Vietnam, and it takes me back to my childhood, to the way World War II vets were when I was younger. But now, time is advancing and it's not slowing its march. But still, there's warriors in our society who are getting close to elderly, and that's the situation we're in now. So it makes me want to know, is Tyrus Rex a Savage Wars veteran?
Yeah, he totally is. In fact, he's a veteran of a lot more than that. He's a pretty interesting dude. But recent memory, and I think the thing that's interesting about doing something in a galaxy is that the collective memory is not as coherent as it could be on one planet. Firefly really illustrated this point when they go to the planet and they see a statue of Jane Cobb, and he's like, oh yeah, I was here one time, and it's a completely different story than the story they have.
Right.
And he's a completely different person than the person they've made him out to be. And so I would say that would be your clue to Tyrus Rex. He is that kind of individual.
I'm looking forward to Tyrus Rex's story because of that. I'm eager to see who this guy is, and I don't know that. And I think if you're writing him the way I think you're writing him, I think that we'll never really know everything there is to know about Tyrus Rex. Like, there could be tons of books, and you're never quite sure, well, is that it? Is this the truth? Is this the real guy? But I like that.
Yeah, and I think too, I like the way that you're writing Captain Keel, and I think in a certain way you're doing an opposite play, which is, I want you to think you know this person, and then you're going to find out that you actually don't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think that.
No, that is the goal. So then the Savage War. So we got that poll result, and then I sent you a huge email saying, hey, here's what I've been thinking about the Savage Wars. And if you're cool with it, I don't know when we would have a time to write this book necessarily. This might be something that maybe one of the other authors that gets involved in takes the ball and runs with it. But do you want to kind of go into the history of the Savage Wars as we understand it right now?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, so we're going to go back to Earth and sort of the not too distant future, to borrow a phrase from MST3K. In the not too distant future, Earth and Mars are fully colonized and overpopulated, and so the decision is made that for the survival of humanity, basically giant arcs or colony spaceships need to be constructed. And so these are constructed. It takes generations to build them. They're built in orbit. They hold hundreds of thousands, in some cases maybe even 1 million people, and they just completely fill the orbit of the moon, of Mars, of Earth, just any space they can find. Now, at this point in time, they don't have faster than light travel, right? So the day comes, they start launching the ships, and they're going out to the farthest ends of space, just anywhere that sort of the planetary NASA thinks there might be a habitable world. These arcs are heading out, and all the people are in stasis. So they leave, and there's a relief on Earth and on Mars because the crowding has sort of gone down and they've got some room to breathe. And then maybe a century later, 50 years, 100 years later, hyperspace is discovered. And so you end up having a situation where there are these colonists who have gone out, but by the time they start arriving, the galaxy is already well populated with humans because they made the jump to light speed and they colonized ahead of time. Do you want to pick up the next part? Or do you want me to keep going?
Keep going. You've got it.
All right, I've got this. So
you're in it.
Right. So the closest planets, the ships start showing up, but a long time has passed because again, they're moving they're moving slower than the speed of light. So it takes a long time for them to get there. But they start showing up at the core worlds, the planets closest to Earth. And so they kind of show up and they adjust, and it's normalized. More time passes, and by now things are getting hazy. The records of how many ships left and where they're headed are gone, and no one really knows where people are going to show up next. But generally they've played it out before. They kind of show up and, hey, here's what happened, and welcome, and sorry everybody is dead, but here's how society works here. You can take passage back to Earth if that's what you want to do, whatever. So they start showing up to the mid-core, which is that next belt of inhabited space, kind of the flyover states, I guess, right? It's a nice place, but it's not the core.
It's a nice place, but you wouldn't want to stay there.
Yeah, I mean, but it's better than Galaxy's Edge, right? Galaxy's Edge is living out in Afghanistan.
Yeah, you've pretty much made a series of bad choices repeatedly to end up at the Galaxy's Edge.
Yeah, totally. So they start showing up at in the mid-core worlds, and again, more long periods of time have passed because of the amount of travel and distance involved. But here we start seeing cases where one or two passengers, they come out of stasis and they're just absolutely psychotic, and chalk it up to just bad psychological evaluation before the launch. They're locked up. They're treated as best as possible. Everyone sort of shrugs it off. But as time goes on and as ships start appearing from their travels and approaching there at the edge of the mid-core, now we're finding out situations, it's increasing until finally we get to a place that's sort of right on the border of the mid-core. And it's a ship that they knew it was coming. They knew the time was going to come. And so the entire planet is excited about the fact that here's this ship. the hollow feeds are telling about the individuals on board. Here was a famous craftsman. Here was a famous athlete. Here are some of the things we hope to learn. We don't know how to lay brick anymore. Whatever it might be, people are excited. So the ship finally comes in for a landing, and the entire planet is essentially there to see these people disembark, these celebrities. And the doors drop, and you get a full-on colonial Space Marine style invasion. They just roll out
Exactly.
with their tech from the time. If you think of the Space Marines and Aliens with the cool burst guns and the sort of like rumblers, that's the kind of tech that was on Earth at the time. Tectonic break is a result of the stasis, and these people are convinced that the galaxy's hostile and they are the only the only humans, the only good left, and they're willing to fight to the death for it. So now you've got a galaxy that's terrorized because these ships are coming, and they're armed because, again, these are expeditionary arc ships. They're armed, they're willing to fight to the death, and nobody knows where they're going to show up next. And so the entire galaxy is just rendered terrified, and the Savage Wars begin because of the type of tech that they're using. Slug throwers weren't being used at this point. People were using blasters. They're more civilized. They burn and do quick work. There's not a lot of blood. And now these guys show up. And so this war rages until the Republic finally declares an end to the wars, feeling like they've stopped the last ship. The last ship has shown up, and that was about 40 years ago, the end of Vietnam. So that's what happens in the Savage Wars.
Yeah, I think you nailed it.
Good. Hope I did it justice. I like this.
I had forgotten on it. To be honest, completely honest, I had forgotten a few of the points. I was like, oh, okay, now, but so like you've got it totally. And now I remember where I wanted to go with it in some of the ways. And I think just the random, cool, unpredictable fear that actually the Republic was doing pretty okay before these ships started showing up. That it would be sort of a Baroque age for it, like a Victorian age, and then suddenly these savages with slug throwers and murderous intent just start, basically appearing anywhere within your culture and going nuts. And then that exposes further cracks, that obviously there are always nefarious and evil people wanting to sort of use any crisis for their advantage, like Barack Obama. And so I would say that this definitely, we could totally riff on a great Savage Wars big novel, like a Tom Clancy novel. That would be cool.
Yeah, I think it would be great. And I think that explanation also kind of goes with why you see a difference in the Legionnaires. You mentioned in your last chapter how the armor that Tyrus Rex has is the MK-11 armor, which is the armor they had during the Savage Wars.
Right.
And it's good armor, and you can't get it anymore. Maybe there's some rich collectors out there that have it, but it's pretty well gone. When you see someone in it, you're amazed, right?
Right.
And then as contracts come in and pockets are lined, the armor gets worse and worse and worse. So that by the time of Legionnaire, you've got the MK-100 style of armor, which is kind of a gray combat armor, which does its job pretty well. Maybe the last set of decent armor, nothing like the MK-11. And then by the time Galaxy's Edge comes, they've got the reflective armor, which is more for show and really doesn't do anything.
Yeah, exactly. It's because production values have declined. People, it's just the laziness and softness of a group of people that feel no exterior threat because they control all, the means of production, to say it that way. And I think, again, just being totally political and taking, pot shots at my enemies, I would just say, like, that was what we just faced with the whole election thing. Whether you agree with it or not, the sense on one side was that there was just that winning was an inevitability. And then this totally random thing happened and this other guy won. And, maybe you didn't have the armor on that you thought you did. Maybe it wasn't as as stunned as people feel right now. And I'm beginning to understand more and more day by day how actually stunned they are. it would be pretty cool in a galactic setting, you know, to have this sort of like super high, you know, culture, like in what is that one game, Mass Effect, you
Hmm.
know, and you've got state of the art armor and state of the art weapons and everything like that. But you know, suddenly you meet something that, yeah, it's equivalent on a lot of ways, in a lot of ways, but it really turns out that that sort of old Iron Age sword is going to serve you a lot better than something that's resistant to lasers. And
Yeah.
I think that was a part that I wanted to get into the Savage Wars, is that not only were slug throwers super important, but also hand weapons, which is kind
Hmm.
of a nod back to Traveler.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I think that that's going to play out more in the story arc for Galaxy's Edge and Galactic Outlaws. But yeah, that's where you are, and then you've also got, you know, this is, like you said, a Republican decline. So you think of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, and just the graft and the greed and the wanton self-interest that was going on. And yeah, I mean, it all kind of makes sense, right? Let's charge
Yeah.
the same as we would for an MK11 suit, but it doesn't have to stop bullets. Legionnaires are replaceable. No one's going to shoot at them. No one's going to stop us. No
Yeah.
one's going to stand up to
Yeah.
us.
Well, I mean, you'll always get that accountant in there that will say, well, these MK11s were made really great during the Savage Wars because it was the Savage Wars, and you know, like, we didn't have that many, you know, Legionnaires. And so what we had, we needed to really protect, because these guys were having to go to like super, you know, suddenly flare up hotspot things and fight against overwhelming odds of homicidal death marines.
Hmm.
And so that really needed to stand up. But then, you know, 40 years later, you have a bunch of accountants sitting around saying, well, we own the galaxy now. The Legionnaires are basically a police force, a highly trained police force. But if we lose 10, we can afford it. And that's always the bad, you know, sort of side of big corporate, you know, government thinking, when they bring in the money at the cost of human lives. And that was something that we, you know, that we saw that came out of the Clinton administration that affected Iraq. Was we saw a definite drawdown in body armor and personal protection, everything like that, to the point that guys in the initial, you know, and right up through the middle of the invasion, were having to, you know, armor their own vehicles and bring their own body armor.
Hmm.
And that was something that the Clinton administration was directly responsible for. So,
Right.
you know, it's it, but they felt, you know, they felt at that point, well, we've defeated the Russians. No one's ever going to give us a hard time. But it's so stupid, because I was in the military in '93, and we knew that the concept of the brushfire conflict was coming up. And in the
Hmm.
brushfire conflict, you need body armor. You don't need tanks. You don't need a tank division. You need body
Right.
armor. So there was a serious, you know, that's something that probably should be held against Bill Clinton among a litany of things.
And so
I'm
have
so
you heard,
political in today's podcast. Why?
you are political. It's because you
I
wrote that
know.
post
I
today.
know. That post,
It's,
was it funny?
I thought it was funny.
I thought it was funny.
Yeah,
Was
you
it
wrote you.
onion levels of funny?
It was pretty good. Yeah, you know, I think Onion Levels, I think that they try to make the joke in the headline a lot of times, and the article is gravy. I think that
Right.
yours was more, you know, the fat was in the article itself.
Yeah. If I could have made the headline funnier, and I toyed with that throughout the night, and I was like, how
Hmm.
can I make this? But I really actually, I think when I do satire, I do it more. Yeah, I give you a lot of bang for your buck in the meaty center.
Hmm.
But yeah, a zingy headline would have been way better.
Yeah, no, it was a good headline still, and a good stock photo and everything. I thought it
Yeah,
was funny. But yeah,
yeah,
so whoever the Republic's Bill Clinton is, or you know, if you're
yeah.
on the opposite side of
He's
the fence,
he's
the
responsible
Republic's
for the what?
George W.
What is the current Legionnaire armor? What is it, Mark 20?
It's just I don't know what we call it because it's just we've been referring to it as a reflective armor.
Okay.
But that's the
Yeah, I
joke.
think maybe they've gotten away from the whole mark system, and they're just like calling it, you know, like eye armor, you know, like maybe it's just
Right.
super cheesy, you know. It's very, yeah, and it does, like, and that's, you know, that's an interesting thing someone just came up with about Star Wars. They're like, what is the purpose of armor for stormtroopers? And I'm
Hmm.
sure they didn't just come up with it. It was just something I saw recently, and
Hmm.
it's right, you know, like no Star Wars the stormtrooper armor has never been used for a device in Star Wars in anything other than to sneak around. You know, as in like Han and Luke are going to put on this armor and look like stormtroopers.
Incognito, yeah.
Yeah, but the armor has never conveyed any superior ability. It's never reflected a blaster shot, which would be a great special effect.
Right, yeah, and a few Ewok arrows were deflected, but you're totally right.
Yeah, obviously not enough.
Well, and yeah, not enough. And it's sort of like you got to kind of question in a world full of blaster pistols, in a world that just had laser swords, saying, yeah, the armor should be able to stop stone arrows. If we can do that, we know we've won. It's like, really, that's what your engineer came up with?
Remember, what does the Emperor say about those guys on the planet, on Endor?
Oh yeah, well they're
his best.
Yeah, that's true. They're a legion of his best.
Legion of my best trips.
And yet he was still ready to turn the Death Star on the planet and blow it up as a last resort if necessary. That's not surprising.
Well, I think he embodies the modern concept of leadership and synergy. I think he's a boss.
A terrible boss.
He is a terrible boss.
Maybe not as bad as Vader.
Hold on, Nicole wants to join the show.
Ooh,
what are we doing?
First special guest.
We're doing a podcast about Galaxy's Edge.
Cool.
Nicole has actually been an early... Close the door. Nicole has been an early reader. What has been your favorite part about Galaxy's Edge? Nicole is my wife.
Well, I definitely like the character Prisma, obviously.
Yeah.
I think you write really good female characters because you're not doing it just to like fill a quota, but you actually...
I'm literally in touch with my feminine
side. So I always really like them. They're tough, but they're realistic and they're relatable.
Yeah.
So
okay.
It's fun.
Nicole likes it, everybody.
Ooh, I liked the scene that you painted last time. Can I like describe it?
Yeah, sure.
Like with all the elevators going up and down.
Yeah.
It reminded me of the Marriott Marquis in New York, but weirder and futuristic.
And what do you always think about that hotel?
Well, I don't think it. I read it.
Right. Which is?
Well, it's kind of dark, but I guess a lot of people used to commit suicide there, and
by throwing themselves off the atrium.
Yeah, down. It's many, many, many floors. So that's kind of sad and dark, but it's a beautiful hotel otherwise.
The Portuguese love the dark and tragic. That's like if you ever want to advertise for Portuguese people, always put a little tragedy in the destination, and that makes it better for them.
It's good to know if we translate into Portuguese.
Yeah.
It's got to be a little more.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I have to take Nicole to opera singing now. Oh, I don't?
That's good because...
Yeah, I was just getting that.
Are we wrapping up?
You're cool.
Well, I think we're about to wrap up. We've answered our questions. We talked about the Savage Wars. So I don't know if there's too much more to really say.
Okay.
Do you have anything else you want to add? We're working on covers, right?
Yeah, I talked to the cover artist today who actually works with me at the game thing, and I showed him the thing that we're going to use, and he was like, that's awesome. And this is a real super big time legit artist that we actually probably could get some ship design out of to make it very Star Wars. So I'm really excited about this dude. It's very cool. And I think once we have the cover, there will be a pride in ownership of this product.
Mm-hmm. And you guys are there with us, all of our subscribers and listeners, right there with us.
Thank you. Yep.
Okay, well, we'll schedule another podcast for next month. I think next week what we'll try to do, Nick, is we'll try to get this show on iTunes and just release the 3 episodes. Our subscribers always get to listen in live. They get to ask the questions. But we'll have it out there for everybody else to kind of hear what's going on. And maybe if you haven't taken the plunge, you can sign up if you're kind of on the fence. I think you'll find it worth your while. We're at a minimum of 3 chapters a month, and we've got some cool stuff coming in the month of March. It'll be our first quarterly bonus for our special access and our partner subscribers. So we've got some cool stuff lined up. And really, if Star Wars, space opera, military science fiction is your thing, this is going to be worth your while. You're not going to regret being in on the ground floor here.
Yes, 100%.
200%.
300%. I did want to say your last chapter was, every chapter you read is great, but I really don't, no spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't read it yet. That was outstanding.
Now, is that the one I sent you the other night?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
they haven't read it?
They haven't read it. I'm going to send it out this
you sent
week. So
okay,
that was just
groovy.
you. That was just you. But
I thought that had come out no, that was just the Legionnaire chapter.
Yeah.
Right?
So I sent out Legionnaire, and then this week, probably either tonight or tomorrow, we'll send out the next chapter with what happens with Keel and Ravi, and we'll introduce a new character that
yes,
hopefully people will dig.
Lieutenant
it's not like
Sassy.
he's on screen very much. Yeah. Lieutenant Sassy Pants.
Lieutenant Sassy Pants. No, it was outstanding space opera, mil sci-fi action, and I really do think in the last few chapters, I wouldn't say we've upped our game, because I've actually liked everything, but I really think now we're starting to get into the meat of blasters and bounty hunters.
Yeah, I think that that first chapter you put together is the hook, and it was just the perfect hook to make people go, okay, I got to see what comes next. And now I feel like we're getting into a point where hopefully people are going to feel like they can't go to bed because they have to keep reading and see what happens.
And are you still working on your secret blaster project?
Oh, well, yeah, I am still working on my secret blaster project. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, let's talk about that real quick.
Well, so we have partner subscribers, and we promised our partner subscribers that if they stuck with us for the first year, we'd give them a sweet annual reward. So I have a friend who lives in Oregon who does customized blasters, and mainly he does reproductions of Han Solo's blasters for the DL-44s for cosplay, things like that. But he and I are working on creating Captain Keel's blaster. And all of our partner subscribers, when that year anniversary comes around, we plan on shipping them a physical, real Captain Keel blaster.
What? That's insane.
That's the plan. Like we said, we want our subscribers.
Get one?
Oh yeah, well totally.
Oh,
yeah, totally. We get one. Yeah, we
writing this.
Goes without saying. So yeah, so Captain Keel's sidearm. And we actually have another concept artist that's working on the Legionnaire project, and he's kind of putting together the N4 rifles, which was the iteration of the Legionnaire's main blaster rifle. So if you're into guns, think of like an MK18 with an open hollow sight, kind of Star Wars-ified. That's sort of the look we're going for. That's what they did with Star Wars. They took a lot of those World War II firearms and said, let's space them up. What I've been doing is just taking modern day firearms and spacing them up.
That's what I did in Soda Pop Soldier, and it works for me.
People seem to like that book. Okay.
Yeah, it's okay. It did all right.
It did okay. It's funny actually. Over in Reddit, I posted a D&D article I wrote, and and I dropped your name, and one of the first comments was, "Is that the same Nick Cole who wrote The Old Man in the Wasteland and Soda Pop Soldier?" Yes, it is. Come on over and like our stuff.
That's good. It is, that is the weird thing about my career, is like I did sell 80,000 copies of The Old Man in the Wasteland on Amazon, and then HarperCollins took it down because they bought it, and then they had me write 2 more books that did nowhere near that level. And I always wondered, like, what happened to the 80,000 people? And I've even talked to Amazon and tried to say, like, can you let these people know that I wrote 2 sequels and all this kind of stuff? And that book was a hit. Like in 11 and 12, that book was a bona fide hit. But but the 80,000 sales, I've never seen that number again. And I'll still run into people that will read other things I've wrote and then write me and say, I just put together, you're the guy that wrote that. And I'm like, yeah.
Right.
And I'm like,
there's
Amazon.
a whole trilogy. I know. That's rough. That is really rough, because that book has like 1,000 reviews, right?
It's closing in. I mean, on Goodreads, it's got like 4,000 or 5,000.
Oh yeah.
But that's Goodreads is trash.
I don't even look.
I don't even look at Goodreads.
I don't even look.
But on Amazon, yeah, it's got a solid 1,000. I don't think I've ever lost a review like in the friend review thing that everybody had. It was good. I'm glad I had that experience, because I think it was a very singular indie moment experience. I don't know that many people are having that experience now. I think the paradigm has shifted, and it is more about being professional. That was totally Wild West, fluky, hit out of the box. You know, I mean, for me, that's what everybody says, like fluky out of the box. For me, it was truly a blessing from God to have been blessed with that and have that level. And it was really cool. And it got me a big publishing contract. And the main thing is, I think what I really liked about that book and what I really dug about its success is that people contacted me and wrote me. And I always dug that. And that was, you know, during, you know, when Iraq and Afghanistan were still in session, quote unquote. And I got a lot of letters from guys who'd been in the military or were in the military over there. And they really said, and women too. And they said, you know, I really related to this book. I felt like I was in my own desert, and it comforted me and helped me. And so there's no amount of money that buys that. There's no review that equals that you helped someone who was having their own long, dark night of the soul, or even just, you know, entertained them for a few minutes. Sometimes that's the biggest thing that you can do in someone's life, is take their mind off their problems. So I was happy to be able to do that.
It never gets old. It never gets old realizing that something that you poured your heart into brings someone else joy. It's amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right on. Well, hopefully this Galaxy's Edge is just the thing for fans of military science fiction. You know, we're definitely pouring it out onto the page, and I just am excited about this thing, man.
Yeah, it's great. I love it. I think your Legionnaire novel is just going to be, I think that's probably going to be the hit, and then they're going to be like, oh yeah, there's this other thing he's doing with that weirdo guy, and I think he wrote Old Man in the Wasteland, and so yeah.
That'll be
and they'll be like, Jason, can we do more books? You're like, no, I've got my Legionnaire series to manage, little man.
Right. Yeah. I'll just George R. Martin it. So the subscribers will be waiting. And I'll be like, well, the next chapter should be here in about 7 years.
Going back to Old Man in the Wasteland, I was number one ahead of his latest novel. I've since written 9 books, and he still hasn't written another book.
And there's no way when it comes out it's going to be able to live up to it. Expectations.
I think I was talking with somebody the other day who's pretty knowledgeable about the whole shenanigans. And he said the problem is that he's written so many characters that he can't tie it all up, and he's lost.
Yeah.
Well, that was his take. It's literally become a multi-tentacled Cthulhuid Hydra that he can't even begin to tame. So I think that's why they've been floating like let's bring Neil Gaiman in to write it or something like that. But that's just like, you know, and that's what sucks. We'll wrap it up now. But that's what sucks when people compare him to J.R.R. Tolkien. It's like Tolkien had too much class to get lost.
Yeah. Not to mention
Yeah.
Too much class in a lot of other ways too.
Yeah, exactly. All right, everybody. Thank you so much.
All right. Adios, fellas.